Pakistan was once viewed as a model for economic development, with countries around the world implementing similar strategies in order to replicate its impressive economic growth. But today, Pakistan is on the brink of financial collapse, recently surpassing Sri Lanka to have the worst cost of living crisis across all of Asia. Now, the rapid decline of Pakistan's currency is threatening to bankrupt the country. But how did all of this happen? And what's coming next for the struggling nation? To fully grasp the unfolding crisis in Pakistan, we first need to look at their early successful years. Between 1893 and 1947, what is now known as Pakistan was a part of the British Indian Empire. After achieving independence, a 40-year economic plan was conceived by the Ministry of Finance. The plan was broken down into 8 separate 5-year plans, each with their own series of goals. The first 5-year plan was to be implemented between 1955 and 1960, but unfortunately it failed miserably. The period was plagued by significant political and economic instability, which lasted until 1958 when a new leader took control of the nation. Ayub Khan served as president of Pakistan for 11 years, and his policies ushered in the strongest period of economic growth in the country's history. He was in charge of implementing the second 5-year plan. It included rapid industrialization and advancement in the education of literacy and science. The plan's main goal was to advance the country as far as possible within the next 5 years along the road of these long-range objectives. President Khan pushed major industrial development, including the construction of freeways, railways, power stations, and hydroelectric dams. He increased the nation's focus on scientific education and reduced agricultural regulations, among other expansions of the private sector. The government's focus was to provide significant temporary stimulus while also encouraging entrepreneurship that would produce sustainable economic activity over time. These changes, alongside a crackdown on corruption and civil unrest, drove the strongest period of GDP growth in Pakistan's history, with multiple years of growth exceeding 10% annually. And the success of this period didn't go unnoticed around the world, with many countries looking to emulate Pakistan's economic success. After the Korean War, Seoul, the capital of South Korea, took to implement elements of Pakistan's second 5-year plan. They developed various core industries such as oil refinery, iron and steel. They built roads, railways and ports, and expanded their energy sector with the development of coal-powered stations. Like Pakistan, South Korea also went through a period of rapid economic growth, which is now known as the miracle on the Han River, because they were so quickly able to grow into a developed country after the devastation of the war. But in 2023, Pakistan's economy is in crisis, with spiraling inflation, and they're on the brink of bankruptcy. So how did they get into this situation? The foundation of Pakistan's economic problems stem from a 25-year period of excessive use of debt. In 1999, the national debt of Pakistan stood at just 3 trillion rupee, and each government that came into power every few years continued to borrow more and more money, raising the national debt to around 60 trillion rupee by 2022. That represents a doubling of the country's debt every 5 years for 25 years. In fact, in fiscal year 2023, the debt service payments actually surpassed the entire annual revenue of the government, which means all of the tax and other types of revenue collected by the government will go towards simply servicing their debt, while all other government spending such as defense, health, and government staff will be paid for by borrowing even more money. To make matters worse, even though debt grew at 14% per year for over 20 years, GDP only grew by about 3% per year, which means the excessive government spending hasn't converted into growing Pakistan's economy. The other major issue is that up until 2021, most of that debt was owed to external creditors. Of the 60+ trillion rupees in debt, more than 90% was money borrowed from outside of Pakistan. So as global confidence in the country declined, many stopped lending or investing in the nation. When this happens to a country, they are forced to print more of their own currency to cover their unbearable debt obligations. Pakistan's money supply, which represents all of the money in circulation, has been increasing steeply for the past 25 years alongside their national debt. And with more currency in circulation, the value of each rupee has declined severely, driving up the prices of goods and services. In 2019, inflation in Pakistan rose to about 10%, but the country was also facing a problem that was much worse, something called a balance of payments crisis. Pakistan has a pretty significant trade deficit, meaning they need to import more goods than they export in order to function. When this happens, the difference is paid for with their foreign exchange reserves. This is reserve currency such as US dollars or euros held by the Central Bank of Pakistan. In 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine caused global oil prices to increase sharply. And since Pakistan is an importer of oil, the cost of their imports became much more expensive. And the more expensive those imports became, the faster Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves declined. By the beginning of 2023, Pakistan foreign exchange reserves were down to just 3 weeks of imports, pushing them right to the brink of bankruptcy. As the foreign reserves of a country dry up, they are forced to print their own currency to pay for their imports. The problem, of course, is that it devalues the currency even further, making imports in foreign currencies even more expensive. In 2022, Pakistan's inflation reached a shocking 27%, and as of June 2023, it's ballooned to almost 40%. Pakistan is in an incredibly fragile position, through which their high expenses require further printing of money, but the money printing is causing severe inflation, making it even harder to fund their obligations. So why haven't they gone bankrupt yet? Well, in part, a large portion of Pakistan's debt is now owed to organizations that are allowing them to roll over their debt. Pakistan has received financing from the International Monetary Fund every few years. When they do, their foreign reserves increase, and as soon as the financing stops, their reserves are depleted by their trade deficit. Pakistan has failed time and time again to fix the root problems of their economy. In 2023, the IMF is looking to enforce much more stringent conditions on Pakistan in exchange for additional funding. Conditions that Pakistan has yet to agree to, preventing a new financing deal from being reached. But beyond the IMF, China now owns about 30% of Pakistan's foreign debt, and according to Bloomberg, has been allowing loans to be rolled over on a regular basis, which means China is also able to exert similar pressure on Pakistan if it wishes to avoid a default. So what comes next for Pakistan? Well, the government is trying to address the cost of living crisis by raising interest rates significantly in the past year. The official rate has risen from 7.5% in the beginning of 2022 to 21% as of June 2023. And while this aims to help attract investors to hold their currency and increase its stability, it's also crippling the local economy, which is already suffering from a wide array of issues. Whether Pakistan is able to avoid bankruptcy will depend in the short term on deals reached with its creditors, and in the long term on expanding its local industry and improving education to reduce their trade deficit and stabilize their currency.